Galvanize is known for providing the most cutting-edge tech education and the most collaborative workspaces in the industry. On this episode of Out of Office, brought to you by GalvanizeTV, we sit down with the CEO of Galvanize, Harsh Patel. And now your host, Katie O'Block.
Hi, and welcome to the last episode of Out of Office. This is the last episode of the series, number 12. We made it. We're here with Galvanize CEO Harsh Patel today to talk about his story, his background, coding boot camps, the future of education, all of that really good stuff. So thank you, Harsh, for being here.
Absolutely.
Taking time out of, I know, is a very busy day for you.
Absolutely.
I really, really appreciate it.
You got it.
We're just going to jump right in.
Let's do it.
I want to talk a little bit about your background to get started, because we start that way with all of our entrepreneurs to know where they came from, to see where they're at now. So I looked on your LinkedIn, and you had started with a career in medicine, or pursuing it at least.
Yep, that's right. I was gonna be a doctor.
You were?
Yeah, I was like 2 weeks away from our white coat ceremony, which is like the first day of medical school. Before I said, I think I'm not going to do this anymore. And
you switched into education.
Yep.
What was kind of the spark for that transition?
So the spark, I'd always wanted to be a teacher. Ever since I was a kid, I was like, teaching is the coolest thing. Like, it's so fun. But I don't know, growing up in a traditionally Indian household where being a doctor is like a big deal, and my dad's a doctor, my older brother's a doctor, and so I was kind of just like raised in a mentality of like, oh, you're gonna get good grades, and you're gonna go to med school, and you're gonna be a good doctor, you're gonna have a good life, and so I was just on that track until I got into medical school, and then I was like, okay, what else is out there? I think I'm good. Like, what else is out there? And Teach for America approached me like senior year of undergrad. And they're like, you can teach for 2 years and then go to med school. And I was like, sign me up. And they're like, you get paid to do so too. And I was like, holy cow, this is great, let's do it. And so the spark was really been there like my entire life of like being in education. I just didn't know I was gonna do it, early in my career rather than later in my career.
Sure.
And it was because of Teach for America that got me into it.
So they just approached you in the hall, probably, or this UMC student center, or whatever it is, and then you just decided to go for it. Where did you do your Teach for America stint?
Chicago, South Chicago.
And you taught?
I taught 5th grade and 8th grade math and science, and social studies as well. Yeah. So
when you were going through that experience, how did you think about your career moving forward after Teach for America? Because it's, you go through medicine and you're like, I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
It's a thing. And then all of a sudden you're a teacher.
Yep.
And then what?
So the whole time I was like, I'm going to do this for 2 years and I'm going to go to med school. So I really didn't think about the rest of my career at all. Like, not one bit. I was just like wanting to do a good job for the students that were in front of me that year and the year after. But what happened was like, I grew up with technology, and I grew up like building computers and like being super into the internet and stuff. And so when I got into the classroom, all of that was non-existent. Like the rest of our staff wasn't very, let's call it like, they weren't digital natives. And so the typical stuff you teach in math class with like a transparency and stuff. And I was like, wait a minute, this seems totally, old fashioned. Like, there's a way more effective way of doing this. And so I started using something called Khan Academy, which back then, what is it, like 8 years ago now, or 10 years ago now or something, was tiny little startup. It was like 4 people. And I had used it in my classroom to teach students math. And I got a bunch of like old laptops from friends and family and like put it together and had them start using it. And I started blogging about my experience. I was like, okay, day 1 with Khan Academy in the classroom, like, all right, this screwed up, that didn't, let's do it this way the next day. And like after a week of that, the Khan Academy team reached out and they're like, this is so cool, like you're the only teacher that's using this stuff inside of a classroom and talking about it. And I was like, sweet, happy to help. And it was right around then that Khan Academy kind of blew up. They did like a 60 Minutes interview, and so my blog became literally the number 2 link on Google if you search Khan Academy, because it was like Khan Academy in the classroom. And so that like flooded my inbox with all these different opportunities from different people that were like, you're an expert at teaching math using Khan Academy. I was like, what? I'm like 21, 22 years, I don't know anything. And they're like, can you come to our district and teach our teachers how to use this? And there was like, and we'll pay for everything. And I was like, what is this world outside of medicine that you can have a career in? Like this is, and that's what gave me the glimpse into something other than medicine that I could possibly do. And it was super exciting because all these different people were like, you have value. Can you deliver that value to a group of people? And I was like, this is fun. Yeah. And so I was like, okay, I got into med school once, I can probably get in again. What's the worst that could happen? And I make a lot of my decisions based on what's the worst that could happen.
Sure.
And so then I just decided, all right, let's go into education. If I really hate it, I'll go to med school again.
So you finish your stint with Teach for America, and you move on to your next, which is head of product, your next venture, and then eventually you go through that and you end up co-founding a company, Maker Square.
Yeah.
What was your spark to start Maker Square?
What was my spark? So I, right after teaching, I started a company that built software that teachers can use in their classroom. It was a text messaging platform for teachers to use to text message their students' parents. And I didn't know how to build, I didn't know software development. I didn't know how to code. I knew like MATLAB, which is a different type of programming, but I didn't know how to code. And I was managing a team of developers, and I was like, you guys almost got it. Like, just this one other thing over here. And I was like, I can't do it myself. This is frustrating. So I started teaching myself how to code, and that led me to realize that, hey, there's nothing out there for people who didn't start with computer science in their undergrad degree or didn't just learn this stuff on their own. There's no other way for people to become programmers. Yet all these companies have all these job openings for software developers. And so a buddy of mine texted me, who always texts me about business ideas, and 9 out of 10 of them are the worst.
We all have one of those.
Yeah, exactly. And this one, he was like, why don't we start a school to teach people programming? And I was like, oh, that sounds cool. Like, I just spent the last 6 months teaching myself. And after being in Teach for America, I was like, I also kept track of everything that I used. So here's a curriculum for how to learn programming. And he was like, dude, you realize this is like, we could start a school to do this stuff. And I was like, yeah, okay, sure, why not? And so it was really him that like dragged me into building that school. And I'd always wanted to move to Austin, Texas, which is where we started the company Maker Square. And so I was like, again, what's the worst that could happen? Let's move to Austin. I'll still keep working on this text messaging app. And if this thing takes off, then we'll work on that. And that's really what did it.
And you became an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Had you always wanted to be an entrepreneur?
You know, I've been asked that question a few times, and the first couple times that people ask, I sat down and tried to think back to my earliest memories of like, okay, when did I really feel like, because I've never self-identified as like a business person, for example. I just always self-identified as like someone who likes to solve problems and build stuff. And in hindsight, I think it was like in 2nd or 3rd grade when I realized that I had a penchant for building companies. A buddy of mine, Caleb, in 2nd grade, we grew up in a tiny small town in central Illinois, and both of us, our families were not wealthy at all, and so we couldn't afford Nike shoes, but Nike shoes were the coolest thing. And so we drew our own Nike swooshes and stuck them to our shoes. And, you know, a couple weeks later, like all the kids in the school bus were like, we want some of those too. So we started selling them for $0.25. And in hindsight, that's when I knew. I was like, oh yeah, okay. I guess I've always had this bug. And then in middle school, I sold candy out of my locker like a bunch of kids did. And then in high school, I started a computer repair company because I was like, oh, there's all these old people in the world that don't know how to use computers. And they pay a lot of money for kids to fix them. And it's so easy to fix their computers. So I think it's always been in me. I didn't realize it until, I guess, just a few years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, we're going to take a quick break.
Cool.
And when we come back, we're going to talk about Maker Square, how you ended up at Galvanize, and kind of the future of boot camps and education and what that looks like. So Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Employers rave about graduates of the remote program just as much as our on-site programs. Just like the in-person programs, the relationships you build with your fellow students are super strong. Please reach out to our admissions department today at galvanize.com.
You make lifelong friends in situations like this when you're learning rigorously for that much time under that much stress. It's like you share experiences. So I could take this class several times over and still learn something new in each lecture. And I also knew this was a very challenging program, and I like to be challenged. I like to learn. I like to push myself. So it definitely was the best choice for me.
Welcome back. We are here talking with Harsh, the CEO of Galvanize. Galvanize, I did not kick off the show this way. I usually do, so it must be the last show jitters. But Galvanize is a learning community for technology. We pair coding boot camps with co-working events and enterprise skills and leveling up at that arena. So thank you for watching again. Last show, I'm so excited. Harsh, we're here. We were talking about you co-founding Maker Square and getting that experience of being an educator and heading down that path. So Maker Square was really the first time you were a CEO.
Yep.
And what was that experience like?
Man, it was crazy because you're not thinking about the fact that you're a CEO. You're just thinking about the fact that you have these problems in front of you and you got to solve them. And you solve one, you solve another. One of my favorite quotes is from this movie, The Martian, where at the end of it, he's given this talk and he's like, you don't know whether you can get off of Mars alive, but you just solve the problem in front of you and you do that 1,000 times and all of a sudden you find yourself back on Earth. And that's very similar to what it's like when you start a company, build it, and you're the CEO at that time, where you're not thinking about anything other than solving the problem that's in front of you.
And you did it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you look back on it and you're like, oh yeah, those were CEO type things that you ended up doing.
As you were going through all of those problems, what kind of resources did you tap in? Did you have mentors or online resources to help kind of work through some of those issues?
Yep.
CEO issues are very, very unique.
Yeah.
And how you think about your company.
Absolutely. I would say there's three key things. One is mentors, like you said. If you're able to find mentors that it's really tough to find mentors that are going to be kind of relevant or applicable to the thing that you are building because your problems are so unique. Whatever business you're building, your problems are very unique. And the best, in my opinion, the best mentors will try to give you or guide you in a place that it's irrespective of your particular business, and then they'll encourage you. Because at the end of the day, when you're leading a company, you're going to make mistakes. The thing you don't want to do is second guess yourself. And so the best mentors will encourage you to do whatever you think is right with conviction and with decisiveness. And if you're wrong, admitting it and changing direction. So that's one, like great mentors around you. I had a couple, but really we were just so busy building the business that I think in hindsight, if I had really latched on or found mentors, it would have accelerated or it would have made us even more successful or whatever. I think it would have been better. Number two is Google, honestly. Googling how to blah, blah, blah. It's still relevant for CEOs, like how to, run an all hands, how to do whatever. Like it's all out there. People write about it. And if you watch and read stories of different people and their experiences, you can just learn. And I think that's relevant for any type of learning. So mentors, Google, and then the third, I would actually credit to being a teacher. I think teachers are some of the best leaders out there, and you're forced to be in this position of leading a group of people, your students, from one place to another with a goal in mind, with different constituencies. You've got parents, you've got your administration, you've got the students, and all of that really prepares you to be a good leader, which is at the end of the day what a good CEO is.
This is a great transition point because I want to sum up very quickly that Maker Square was acquired by Hack Reactor. You moved into the CEO at that position, and then Hack Reactor was acquired by Galvanize, and you are now the CEO in this position. So thinking about your now 3 experiences as a CEO,
Yep.
You're the first CEO on the show, fun fact, that is the CEO of a company that you did not co-found.
Yeah.
What's your process like now that you've done it twice, coming into a company that you did not co-found and looking at it holistically and keeping it on the right track to move the business forward?
I still think the same fundamentals apply.
Yeah.
It's all
still
about
Google it.
You Google. It's all about problem solving.
Yeah.
And regardless of whether you built the thing or someone else built the thing, it's all about problem solving. And to me, it's especially important when you haven't built the thing. It's especially important to get to know the people who have. And at the end of the day, that's the people that work there. So you have to get to know, frankly, every single person. You have to learn from them. You have to ask them about what they believe, what they have been observing, and then you have to observe as well. You have to observe how the business works. You're going to look at all the data about the business. And it's kind of just like accelerating the process of not having started the business. Because when you start the business, you learn all of those things, call it over the first 6 months or a year. But when it's not the company you started, you have to replicate that same thing and accelerate that process of learning, which frankly doesn't take that long if you approach it from a problem-solving perspective.
Sure. I love it. Well, you're a learner and a leader and an educator at heart forever and ever.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So I want to talk a little bit about the future of education.
Okay.
So Galvanize sits in this really unique spot of being a boot camp in a world where traditional four-year colleges, there's a transition happening, to be totally honest and transparent about what that is. So right now, where do boot camps go from here?
Yep.
And where does traditional higher education go from here? So continuing ed and higher ed, where do we go?
So I actually think that boot camps don't compete with four-year universities right now. Boot camps actually compete with master's programs, where a working professional is trying to make a career change. And the only way to do that before was to go back to school for a 2-year master's or a year post-bac or whatever it is. And then came boot camps, where if you want to be a developer or a data scientist, you now have an alternative. You don't have to do your 2-year master's and relearn all this stuff. You can do it through a boot camp. So I actually think that right now, boot camps compete with the post-grad programs that exist out there. And so I actually don't think that boot camps are well suited yet to compete with four-year universities. And that's because at the end of the day, four-year universities are not built for the same outcome that a boot camp is built for. Master's program, on the other hand, they are built for the same outcome. Master's programs for the most part, are interested in the future careers of their graduates. Whereas four-year universities, they don't build for that outcome. You don't talk to someone at a four-year university and talk about the job that you're going to get after graduating. Yeah. It's about learning and enrichment. And frankly, from the ages of 18 to 22, it's about learning how to be an adult.
Yeah.
and that's not the outcome that boot camps are built for.
Right.
So I think you could build a boot camp that is about learning how to be an adult and then compete with four-year universities. But it's not the case today.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
Absolutely.
Okay.
The model of boot camps right now, we've seen some shut down,
Yeah.
we've seen some be acquired. Is the model as it exists right now, do you feel like it's a sustainable model or will it change over time?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's more people going to boot camps today than there were last year and the year before and the year before. That's how you know it's sustainable.
Absolutely.
Especially in a B2C world. The consumer makes the choice. And especially in a world where the government is not funding this education yet, you know for sure that if someone buys your product, there's a market for it.
Yeah.
And in a world where it's growing year over year over year, to me that tells me it's sustainable, for sure. Now the model of payment may change over time with income share agreements, with the VA now funding vets to take different boot camps. So the funding model will change over time, but at its core, the rapid career-focused education, that's not going anywhere. Yeah. And frankly, it's not new either. It's just a modern day trade school, which has existed for a long time.
Exactly. One of the critiques that I get often of a boot camp is that students aren't necessarily ready for employment, or that they aren't as ready as someone who's gone to grad school because it is so accelerated.
Yep.
How would you address that kind of concern?
So I think the key difference for Galvanize and the Hack Reactor brand within Galvanize is that we do a good job of making sure that people are going to be ready before you enter the program. So I think that critique is frankly valid for boot camps that don't have a rigorous screening process, because you just can't know whether someone's going to be successful if you don't do the work ahead of time to make sure that they will be. And if you know they're not going to be successful, you can create pathways for them to learn more before coming into the boot camp. Frankly, I think that's our secret sauce, right? Like, you make sure someone's going to be prepared before they come into the boot camp. You have a strict bar for that entry, and then you educate them. Then you know for sure they're going to be prepared. So I think the critique is valid for boot camps who don't have a rigorous admissions process.
Well, that's it for us today. Thank you so much for your time. I am so excited to see where Galvanize goes, but also where the future of boot camps go.
Yeah.
And education, accelerated education and continuing education, there's leaps and bounds to be had, I'm sure.
I think this model is the future.
Yeah.
And we are at the cusp of the general population really embracing this as the future.
Yeah.
Right now, for example, you don't have this at your dinner table conversation when your kid is going to figure out what they want to do professionally. And I think in the next several years, that's going to start working its way into that dinner table conversation of like, okay, what do you want to do with your life?
Yeah. I'm so excited. Thank you so much for taking your time today. And thank you to all of you for watching the entire series. Thank you to all of our entrepreneurs that have participated. We've had some amazing ones, so make sure to go back and watch if you missed any episodes. And then if you want to watch any of our other content on our channel, from how-tos to interviews with entrepreneurs or student journeys, subscribe to our channel, check it out, and come visit us at galvanize.com. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.